You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Ddj Rev7. I'm also the CEO and founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors, a PR firm that specializes in music innovation, music tech, and all that kind of stuff. This is exciting. I'm at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and this is going to be great because, as you know, the convergence of music making and music distribution and music amplification has continued to be a theme at Music Tectonics, and I think you're really going to enjoy today's conversation. I've got with me here on the 26th floor of the Hilton Hotel, just above the convention center on one side and some crazy concerts on the other. You might hear some sound through our window. We're looking over Austin. I've got with me here Lars Schlichting. He's the director of product planning and artist relations with Pioneer DJ. Lars, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dimitri. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we're at South by Southwest. You said this is your first time here.
I know. How crazy is that, right? I know. I've been in this industry for so long, but it's the first time I've made it here. So for many years, this event overlapped with Miami Music Week, which is another very important event on my calendar. And so I never really made it. And then, last year didn't happen. The year before didn't happen either, So, I'm stoked to be here. I'm more, we make DJ products, so this is more of a live music event, I think. But there's plenty of DJs here as well, so it's more in the open format space, So last night I saw Jazzy Jeff and Rich Medina and Buck Rogers and DJs like that, So it's a great time.
Super cool. Yeah. Well, I love that you're here, and we're here with you on your first South by. Let's start big, and we'll get a little bit more and more narrow into your area and so forth. But how has DJing changed as an artistic form in recent years?
Oh crap! I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, I think there are different stages that we went through, right? So back in the 70s, people were DJing on equipment that wasn't made for DJing, right? Torrance turntables and Bozak mixers and that kind of stuff. And then the next step was equipment actually made for DJs, like in the 80s, in the 90s. Then you saw people switching from vinyl to CDs and also to DVS, which stands for Digital Vinyl Solutions. So, Serato and Traktor are two companies that are well known in that space. In 2009, we came out with a player called CDJ 2000, and that introduced the technology of DJing from a USB stick, And so today in the house techno EDM world, that's sort of what everyone is using. And in the open format world, it's predominantly the DVS solution, predominantly Serato, So because DJing from a technical point of view has gotten so much easier, right? Like back in the day, trying to mix 3 records of vinyl together was very, very difficult. Today, mixing 3 CDJs together, for example, is quite simple, even if you're not using sync, just because your songs are analyzed by a software called Rekordbox. And so you have a beat grid, you know what the beats per minute are per track, because of all that technology, it's gotten easier. And, sure, you can abuse the fact that it's gotten easier because you can see now whatever celebrity DJs, influencers DJing, and they do have decent jobs DJing because the technology is there, But it's also allowed artists, on the artistic side of the spectrum to take it to like whole nother levels, where you have 4, 5, 6 channels all playing music, playing either songs or portions of songs or playing stems or playing samples, So we've seen in recent years, a big shift towards in that direction.
Right. So you mentioned this increase of the number of channels. You're saying because it's easier now to get the mixes right in a live setting or a live recording setting, you are basically able to use more inputs and have not just a couple of tracks going for mixing, but also add these other layers on top. Is that why there's more channels getting added?
Yeah, that's the main reason why. I mean, we came out with a mixer 2 years ago, called DJ MV10, and that's a 6-channel mixer. It's the second time we've done a 6-channel mixer. We've did this once before, but here that was the primary motivation. We also make a sampler called DJS 1000 that basically allows you to create a track on the fly, or create a drum pattern on the fly, or create a bass line on the fly, and then just add that. And we have a protocol called ProDJ Link that connects all that technology together, right? So the CDJ, the DJM, which is what we call our mixers, the DJS, which is that sampler, they can all be connected over Ethernet cables, and they can exchange data. And so you could start your performance by just, I don't know, creating a drum pattern on that sampler, and then mixing the CDJ into that, and just layering and layering and layering, and just starting with like just a kick. But then, after 10 minutes, you got like 6, 7, 8 different elements going,
I love how in a very short period, you just explain this like evolution that took a lot of time, this layering all the way from the original vinyl turntables that weren't even meant for this, going all the way up to where you now have stems, and you have like live beat making as a part of the process built into the same kind of ecosystem of equipment and so forth. But like, none of that stuff was predicted in advance. It was sort of watching the evolution. Once you got to that next tier, that next level, then people started to envision, well, what would happen if I push this one step further? And then from there, what about four channels isn't enough? What about 6 channels? And let's do some live beat making on top of that. So now that you've seen this all emerge and come to this level of maturation, what's the next thing that's going to get built on top of that?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. I mean, one thing that I just alluded to is stems. So that technology emerged about 10 years ago, where you had technologies that could take a finished track, a fully mastered track, and break it down into stems. Because Native Instruments, for example, for a while tried to do something with stems, but you had to buy tracks that were already separated into stems, which was very laborious and hard to find and so forth, But now the technology has gotten better and better of actually taking a finished track and then converting it into stems, So I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that space. And the other thing that I think is going to be interesting is, how data is going to play a role in the future of DJing. So we have this protocol I mentioned earlier called ProDJ Link, and it was developed back, in 2009 when we released the CDJ 2000, because it allows 2 CDJs to communicate with each other. So I can send data from one player to the other. So if I have only one USB stick, I can play on both players from that one USB stick, because the data and the audio travels over that Ethernet cable that connects them. And in 2013, 2014, you saw DJs becoming bigger and bigger, drawing bigger and bigger audiences, literally playing stadiums, and that put artists in a position where they had to put on a show. We went from, being in a dark underground club to all of a sudden literally being in stadiums. And so DJs would bring in VJs and LJs and all those elements. There's some DJs that travel with a crew of 5 or 6 or 7 people, a stage manager, a tour director, an LJ, a VJ, like a video jockey, and a light jockey, all that kind of stuff. So companies at the time were hacking into our protocol, pretending to be a player to access the protocol, So I contacted some of these companies and started working with them. And so we now have a solution for artists that want to elevate their show in such a way, So there's a software called Show Control that taps into the protocol, in a legal way. Like they're partners of ours. We work with them directly. And so you can now design a lighting show and a video show to correspond with music, but it's not that the artist needs to communicate to the VJ and the LJ in advance what they're going to play, the DJ can be completely spontaneous, so they have the freedom to just play whatever they want, just like before, so sorry, this is kind of a long way of getting to my point, but so to me, the question is now, where do we go next with this data, and that now we watch what's happening in the metaverse, and we watch what's happening with, Unreal Engine and so forth. And so I'm wondering whether this data can also now go into the metaverse and elevate performances there.
Yeah, super, super cool. Yeah, I'd love to see what happens with performance, because it's challenging to be a performer when you're a DJ. People can't see you strumming or play. Obviously if you're a turntablist, there's a lot with the scratching. There's a lot you can see in stuff there. Although from a big stage, it's hard to see. But how do you add those other elements? And as these other visual elements come to life in new ways, it's super cool to see how it's synced up with the music, with the DJ feeling like they're in control of it, like it's all synced up together. So I love that. I like that response. So let's get a little more specific. What new products has Pioneer DJ launched recently?
So 2020 was a really big year for us. We launched the DJM V10 in January, which is that 6-channel mixer. And that's been a bit of a game changer. We were actually surprised how many artists were drawn to that product. And then the same year, we also released the CDJ 3000, which is our new top-of-the-line player, which replaced the 2000 Nexus 2. And we also released the DJM S11, which is our top-of-the-line mixer for open-format DJs, which replaced the DJM S9. And that has also been, a really successful product because it has a screen that allows you to customize the mixer in whole new ways. I mean, we actually did a battle mixer with a screen called DJM 909 many, many years ago. So we were the first to do that. That was a mixer that had 50 effects built in and really ahead of its time. And so the S11 came out in 2020. So one of the products that we recently released that's gotten a really, really good reception is called Ddj Rev7. And that was a really interesting product for us to develop because it's the first time we've done a motorized platter. So typically we have a static platter, so you can scratch on a CDJ, but the platter doesn't spin. Of course, we make turntables like a PLX 1000, PLX 500 that has motorized platters, but we've never done a CDJ or a DDJ, which is what we call our controllers, with a motorized platter. So that was a real challenge for us, and I'm really proud of that product because we worked on it for so long, and we had so many meetings. I mean, we always spend a lot of time developing the new CDJ, the new DJM, but this is the most time we've ever spent on developing a controller.
So the point of so what you're saying is obviously a traditional turntable needs a motor, so the vinyl goes around and makes the music. But on these on the ones that don't have actual physical vinyl on them, it never spun because you only used it to scratch, right, or to kind of change the sound, but having this Rev7, it's motorized as if there's vinyl on it, so it gives you a more close feel to how vinyl would feel. Is that the point of having the motor on it?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're an open format DJ, if you're a turntablist, a scratch DJ, you in most cases prefer the feeling of a rotating platter. I mean, there are people who scratch on a CDJ and do a fantastic job at it, and if you close your eyes, you can't tell the difference between them scratching on a CDJ and them scratching on a turntable, but most turntablists prefer the feeling of a spinning platter.
Got it. Cool. Well, let's expand out again because you're in this world of DJing. You know a lot about kind of how DJs are interacting with the world. How have festivals adapted to COVID, and what's your outlook for the rest of this year, 2022, 2023, and beyond? What's happening on the festival circuit?
Yeah, I don't envy anybody who's tried to put on a festival in the last 2 years. I mean, there's been so many cancellations, and Coachella's on again, Coachella's off again. In January I was supposed to fly down to Costa Rica for a festival called BPM Festival. My flight was on a Tuesday, and then on Sunday the Costa Rican government changed the rules, and all of a sudden you weren't allowed to do an event with more than 200 people anymore. And it was only for a 2-week span because of Omicron. And so the last 2 years have been extremely challenging, but I'm very optimistic for this year. I think Ibiza is going to be bonkers this year. I think, people just want to get out there. People want to party. People want to be with other people. People want to dance. Last year, the only way you could dance in Ibiza was if you, you had to buy a table, and it was basically like a dinner party. You'd have the biggest DJs in the world perform in front of 200 people at something that looked like a dinner party. They basically put tables in the nightclub, and would have barriers or lines on the floor, which area you had to stick in and whatever. So it's been it was really challenging, and a lot of people in that industry were really hurt and, devastated financially. Luckily they got some help from the government, certainly here in the US. So, but for this year, again, I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be a good season. I'm flying to Miami next week for Miami Music Week. Ultra Music Fest is going to happen for the first time since 2019. Ultra Miami, there was a Ultra in Taiwan, a while ago, but so I'm really looking forward to this year.
Cool. That's good to hear. I know the live and festival scene needs to come back. It's hard to keep that momentum going when you have such a long period of isolation and rules changes and so forth. Of course, we want everyone to be safe, but also make everyone's livelihoods possible again. So, but during this time, things have changed a lot, and some of those things probably won't go away. What emerging opportunities are there for DJs online? You referred to the potential of metaverse stuff. What are you seeing emerging now that are those new opportunities?
Well, one of the big stories of 2020 was certainly Twitch. Twitch was, a platform for gamers, and a lot of DJs jumped on Twitch in March, April, May, June of 2020. So there's been some incredible success stories. There's an artist duo called Gabriel and Dresden that I'm really good friends with, and I remember talking to them in March of 2020, and they barely knew what Twitch was. And then within a month, they had 10,000 followers on Twitch, and they've been doing regular streams on Twitch ever since. So there's a lot of success stories. There's an artist in Orange County that I know called Julian B, who was completely unknown before, and she just kind of blew up on Twitch and was doing 10, 12-hour sets on Twitch, and now she's got $75,000 on Twitch, So that is something that is here to stay. And, on the product planning side, we've actually pivoted to try to incorporate features that cater to those artists, So we have some products coming up that I can't talk about in detail yet, but we have some products coming up that have that artist in mind who performs on Twitch. Another thing that's been exciting is we entered into a partnership with a company called Tribe XR, and Tribe. So if you have a VR headset like an Oculus Quest, or for example, you can go and enter Tribe, and you can learn how to DJ in Tribe. So if you're interested in DJing on CDJ 3000s and DJM9 on Nexus 2, you can go into Tribe and mess with it and play around with it, and it's it's much cheaper than going out and buying the equipment, but it feels very real. I was shocked how real it feels. So that's a great way of learning how to DJ, and if you just want to experiment with it a little bit. But in that space, I think we're going to see a lot more. I mean, we saw David Guetta in Roblox like a month ago. He wasn't really DJing. I think it was just a pre-recorded set. But the idea is there. The thought is
don't
there.
tell your kids. Pretend it was real.
I know. Well, whatever. We had Marshmello in Fortnite. We had this kind of stuff. So, I think it just goes to show that the interest is there. Like when Marshmello was in Fortnite, it broke all sorts of records or whatever in terms of viewership, so people are interested in experiencing that and seeing that. And so now we need to figure out how to make it more real, because right now it feels kind of gimmicky and, the equipment doesn't look real and they're not really DJing. I mean, in Tribe, they're really DJing. Like that looks and feels all very real, but these other two examples I just gave, I think they were just pre-recorded sets. But I'm sure we're going to figure that out eventually.
Yeah. And for listeners who maybe didn't catch, we've had TribeXR CEO Tom Impellamini on, and he told us about someone who did go into TribeXR, learn to DJ, and then translated that into, an IRL experience, really DJing, moving over to the equipment and so forth. So that's a really interesting entry point. And it's cool to hear about these artists that you were mentioning with the live streaming too. I suspect you come across a lot of artists in the work you do with artist relations. Tell us about some others, maybe not on the live streaming, but other like innovative artists in your world, what they're doing, what they're innovating around. Give us a window into that.
One thing that I find really interesting is, I mean, I've been in this space now for about 30 years, and I have friendships that go back 25 to 30 years. And some of these people are, to this day, the hardest working, most innovative people there are. So Louis Vega is someone I don't know. I don't really know anybody in like house music that works harder than Louis. And Louis always wants to try out the new, so he is on the V10 and he uses the DJS 1000. DJ Sneak, also somebody who's been in the business for 30 years or more, has probably done more with the DJS 1000 than anybody else, like, creating entire tracks on it, I think another great example is Sophie Tucker. I mean, Sophie Tucker is probably very well known. I mean, they're almost a pop act, but they come from like a house music background, and they also use the DJ MV10 because they play like guitar and bass and things like that, and also use the DJS 1000 sampler to take their performances to another level, So there are a lot of acts out there who come from like a band background, but they're also interested in DJing and DJ culture, and now they're trying to fuse the two together. Another example is maybe Bob Moses, or Zoo, who both use the V10, so it's a very high quality mixer, like sound quality wise, but it also has all sorts of crazy routing options that you don't typically have on a DJ mixer, and the type of delays and reverbs and stuff that you can layer on top of it. One thing that's really interesting about that mixer is it has a compressor on every channel. It's never been done on a DJ mixer before, and what that allows you to do is, if you're playing a music file that's raw, that's unmastered, like for example, you're just putting some beats together on a sampler, or using like an 808 or a 909, or you're playing an older record from 20 or 30 years ago, or you're playing a piece of vinyl, you can now add that compressor to it, and that allows you to blend it better with a modern track, with a track that was like recently mastered.
Very cool. Love it. Love to hear about some of those innovations and where that continues. I love it because it's built into the culture of any kind of DJing, that, like using equipment to its limits or beyond. Are there artists who are doing things with your Pioneer DJ equipment that the company didn't expect?
Yeah, that happens all the time, and it's really fun to watch. I mean, when we came out with our DJM S9 mixer, this battle mixer that I mentioned, I mean, we came out with that product in 2015, and what people started doing with it, you have like a delay effect on it, and you can basically use that to loop a track and then just layer on top of it. And so people would start using that to almost like create a track, and just, loop 4 beats and then loop a clap and then add this to the loop and that to the loop.
So like rebuilding the track in real time.
Exactly, like things like that. And what we see a lot now is these open format DJs that use the DJS11, for example, come up with all sorts of creative MIDI mapping. You can, if you have a computer connected that's running DJ software, you can map things out creatively, and that allows you to put together a whole new performance that nobody else can do because they don't have it mapped out the way you do. With as an open format DJ, it's all about making it easy to accomplish certain effects or certain sounds. Most open format DJs probably wish they had 4 hands because there's so much to do. But if you map it out differently, then you can combine effects, or you can combine functions, and that allows you to accomplish that.
So who are the artists that are the ones that are always asking for new features or products? Are there examples of the ones that they push the limits and they're like, yeah, I don't have 4 hands, so you're going to need to do this next thing?
Well, that's always the balancing act. When you're a company like Pioneer DJ, and when you have the market share and the dominance in the DJ booth that we have, you have to be careful with how far you push the envelope. So the CDJ 3000 or the 2000 Nexus 2 before, or the DJM 9 on Nexus 2, the DJM S9, those products are found in DJ booths all over the world. Doesn't matter which country, and a lot of artists who use that gear don't necessarily own it. So when we develop a new CDJ, a new DJM, sure, we want to put as much technology in it as we can. We want to take it to that whole new level, but we always have to keep in mind that not everyone owns the gear. Not everyone is interested in picking up a manual. There are plenty of artists who never look at a manual. So it has to be intuitive. And I think that's the thing that we do best. Like we build products that you can step up to and you can kind of figure it out, and it's intuitive. But there's many artists that come to mind, but we have an artist in the UK called James Sabila. I know our product planning team over there always has meetings with him, and it'll turn into like a 4 or 5 hour meeting. Like, I got this idea, and I got that idea, and I got that idea. So over here, I'm in really close contact with Jazzy Jeff, who I actually just saw last night. So there's been a bunch of products that he's been instrumental in helping me develop, and he always gives really good feedback and comes up with new ideas. Carl Craig is a techno DJ that I work with closely. He had a lot of great suggestions on the DJM V10, and Roger Sanchez is definitely someone who needs a shout out, because I've worked with Roger literally since day one. I joined this company a long time ago, and it was actually because of his recommendation. Like he recommended me to the then product planning manager in the company, and that was back in 1996. So Roger is always someone who texts me ideas and, oh, you need to improve this, and what about this?
Super cool to hear about that dynamism between the company and the artists back and forth. You guys do some new feature, see how people use it, then they give you some suggestions, you guys tweak some things and so forth. Not easy to do with hardware, and I appreciate your response about people using the equipment in ways you wouldn't expect, by saying, well, sometimes you want to do the opposite. You want to make it easy for them to just get going because they have to jump from device to device when they're touring or performing in new spaces and so forth. It's such a tricky balance. I mean, even from we have a lot of music tech companies, startups listening to the podcast, and even if it's a digital product, how do you get that user interface with the perfect balance where people can figure it out? It can do cool stuff, but it's not so complicated that they just step away from it. So that's a great lesson learned on the episode.
Yeah, I mean, we make hardware predominantly, so we don't have the luxury of just
making it up,
creating an MVP and say, okay, we'll tweak it as we go along. I mean, sure, we can do firmware updates. We do firmware updates all the time. I mean, particularly on our CDJ 3000, for example, we've now had probably 10 firmware updates since we released it, So there are things we can do, but we can't add a button, at the factory. Like that would be a Mark II product. That would have to be a whole new product. So that's definitely a challenge.
Cool. So we have a segment on the podcast where we ask guests to get super sci-fi. So I'm going to ask you, what are some futuristic things we can expect from the DJing world in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think I'm going to jump back to what I was saying earlier about utilizing data and going into the metaverse. Mm-hmm. We're here at South by Southwest. I don't know. I can't count on one hand, on two hands, how many times I've heard the term metaverse. I mean, everyone's talking about it. So it's real. It's coming. It's happening.
Actually, if you look right over there, those domes are right below our window. I know we've had on the podcast recently Hume, which has an artist called Angel Baby, which is a NFT that now performs. They perform down in that dome all week long down there. It's an 8-foot bunny from Fluff World. You can listen to that episode too, but it's right there. Lars, do you see those domes?
I do. The Wisdom Dome.
Yeah. So metaverse stuff.
Yeah. So that's. I think that's going to be really interesting on where that goes, and then also the continuation of what I was talking about earlier of fusing live shows with DJ shows and elevating that. I think there's also with stems and all those things I mentioned earlier. So I think there's a lot going to be happening in the next few years.
Creates a lot of opportunity for new creativity, which is super cool to this idea that you're linking up these visual elements as well, expanding into other realms that weren't possible before. It's super fun to think about it. Well, let me ask you one more thing before we wrap up. So we've got a lot of innovation-minded folks out there in the world listening to this. Are there things that you hope to see other innovators bring to the world? Maybe Pioneer DJ interacts with them, or maybe it's just something you think could be helpful. Any solutions out there, or any advice for folks that are building innovation mindset stuff for the future of DJing?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about a lot while I'm here and we're talking about the metaverse and trying to bring DJing into the metaverse and so forth, I think that if you're creating an alter ego, and that opens up all sorts of opportunities, but it also allows you to not be a good person in the metaverse. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something.
The anonymity of having an alias.
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot online. I mean, the way people comment on YouTube or something is just really ugly because you got that anonymity. And I think it's really important that as we're entering these worlds, that the companies that are creating these opportunities are also trying to develop sort of a code of conduct or sort of leading by example, because if you show people how to act and how to be, and give a positive example, then I think people will adopt it. Not in all cases, but I think that's something that we need to be very conscious of, because otherwise this whole thing could kind of backfire on us.
Man, I love that, Lars. Like learn from past mistakes in our social media development and so forth, to really consider how to build respectful behavior once we detach from being responsible for not being in person. We're not right there in our community with our family, with our friends, and all of a sudden it creates this opportunity. I really, really value that response. Super way to end the conversation. Lars, this has been a blast talking to you. I'm so glad we both made it to South by Southwest in person. I tell you, people, if you're out there and you haven't started yet, I want you to make your own decisions about staying safe and what makes sense for your risk-reward formula. But I sure hope to see all of you in person sometime soon. Lars, this has been great. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me here, and it's been a blast being in Austin. So thank you to the city of Austin as well, and for putting on this great event. And it's just really nice to connect with people in person again. It beats a Zoom call any day.
All right, let's go out to see some showcases now.
Let's do it.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know you can dig deeper into all our episodes with the show notes at musictectonics.com? While you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference, sign up for our newsletter to get updates, or get the Music Tectonics app for music tech news. Everything we do explores seismic shifts that shake up music and technology the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and find me, Ddj Rev7, if you can spell it, on LinkedIn. Bye-bye!
You're listening to Music Tectonics.